Welcome to a special tribute episode of Driftwood Outdoors. Unfortunately, the conservation community here in Missouri has suffered a great loss. Our good friend Jerry Presley, former director of the Department of Conservation, passed away at 94 years old. What an incredible life he lived. Shags and I are both really proud of the fact that we got to know Jerry, spend some time with him, not only in and around Jeff City working on Conservation Federation issues, but also down at his place in Van Buren on the Current River. You'll hear in the podcast that I think was it 2020 we first recorded.
Yeah, I believe it was episode 60. Yeah, like 5 years ago. And this will be episode 307.
So if you listen to this episode again, or maybe you haven't heard it before, you'll hear so many cool intricacies of life in the 50s, 60s, and then into his work with MDC. What a difference in eras between where he was growing up in rural Missouri in the Ozarks back in the 40s, 50s, compared to where we are today. And, there's only been 10 directors in MDC's history. And I haven't known all of them, but I've known half of them. And Jerry Presley is just one of the best people I've ever known. So,
And it was just so neat to be able to get to hang out because we got invited to his house. We recorded this podcast like in his sunroom that overlooked his backyard, and him just talking about how he might be kin to Elvis Presley. And I still to this day use him as an example when we're talking about deer in Missouri and even the battles with CWD and how some people think MDC's messing it all up. And I'm like, dude, in this guy's life, because he was 94 years old, in his life, he tells a story in this podcast about how someone found a deer track and they let the school out, grade school out, so the kids could see a deer track because of how rare it was. And now what, we have 1.7 million deer in the state
yeah.
in one person's lifetime, and people are still complaining, saying MDC is mismanaging it. And I'm just like, what are you doing? I mean, talk to this guy. He lived it. He saw the worst of the worst and the complete rebound. And it's just, he had so many incredible stories. I still think of it today, of being able to share that time with him in his house and how kind he was and how he brought us in. And it was just a moment, a memory I won't forget.
Yeah, he was from Low Wassie. I'll never forget that. Low Wassie. And I want to say it means something like low value, or he had a funny joke about it. And the Jerry Presley Center is down there at Twin Pines by Winona. I was fortunate to be there when they dedicated that to him. I actually got to ride down there with him from Jeff City and listen to so many of these stories. After this CWD thing that we've done, we're kind of getting a spike of questioning, like, why do you guys care so much? Like, how is it that you just believe what MDC is doing is right? And I can point my finger at Jerry Presley and just say there's a long lineage of folks that have dedicated themselves to the conservation of this state. And the unique story of the Missouri model of conservation and what the people did here in 1935 to create MDC, and then the turmoil that ensued to get it actually off the ground and running, and then to build these generational heroes of conservation, which Jerry is certainly one, no doubt about it. Um, I just feel like I owe those guys a debt of gratitude. I mean, they built this for us, and now we've got to protect it. And there's a lot of special interests that don't want to see it protected the way we do. And there's some really good-hearted people that just see it differently than we do. The word that drives me crazy right now is all. When people say all of us want this or all of us want that, and usually the people saying that are in a minority, and they just think everybody believes what they believe. I agree that most people want to go out in the woods and kill a big buck. Nobody wakes up on opening day dreaming of killing a forkhorn. But
You
some
know,
people will go on with their lives on Monday if they don't. And some people, that's all they got going in life is chasing those antler inches. So to those people, I just say good luck. I hope it works out for you. I hope you're happy. But to the people that are associated to the high fence industry that's now attacking the department, to the absolute worst of the worst, who are the washed up television hosts, oh my god, dude, just let's not
get into it. This is supposed to be remembering a great
Jerry.
man in conservation
but
in Jerry Presley.
When we stand up to those people, when people are like, why do you put yourself out there? Like, why are you willing to take these beatings online? It's to honor Jerry Presley and the people like Jerry Presley. And I'm gonna miss him. You know, he was driving around in his 90s, you know what, and he liked to have his toddies, you know. That's what he call his drinks. He had his toddies. So he's just an example of a tough Ozark guy, forester, loved the outdoors, loved the Missouri, loved the Current River, and loved to sit there and tell a story and have a toddy.
Amen. And I do want to, we're going to go right into this podcast that we recorded back in 2020, again, episode 60. But I wanted to read a paragraph from his obituary because I thought it was pretty powerful. That in 2021, at the age of 90, Jerry published a book about his grandmother and his life growing up in the Ozarks. He was proud of his roots, proud of his granny, and grateful for the life she gave him. As we prepare to say our last goodbyes, we are reminded of a passage from his book. Because of Granny and my dear family, my universe will twinkle until the day I pass on from this earth and into my life thereafter. So I think that was pretty powerful and a nice way to issue ourselves into this remembrance and a thank you to Jerry for his time sitting down with us back 5 years ago. Enjoy a replay of episode 60 of Driftwood Outdoors with former Missouri Department of Conservation Director Jerry Presley.
When today's guest was a boy, deer tracks were so rare they took a bus out to see one. Eventually, he worked his way up to become the director of the Department of Conservation in Missouri, and then had a wonderful career following that directorship at Bass Pro Shop and a few other places. I'm Brandon Butler.
I'm Nathan Shaggs McLeod.
And I'm Jerry J. Presley. I tell people that sometimes they want to know that, I'm kin to Elvis.
What's the lineage?
Well, I have a first cousin that says we actually are kin to him.
That's cool.
But I never got a pink Cadillac or anything out of it.
But you got the moves?
Yeah.
I was going to say, can you dance?
Not anymore.
Now
I'll be 89 in December, so that move comes hard on me now.
I'm really excited to get into this podcast to talk to you about your time as the director of the department and just the things that you saw during your tenure and the where we're headed and where things came from. And if you're new to the podcast, we like to start off with a few stories. And first off, we got to give Brandon a chance at a little backpedaling because the previous podcast with Kevin Kroom, we started that off with a big giant rant about the 11 Point being sold and how the state wasn't going to appeal. And it wasn't even a day or two after that podcast came out that Missouri is going to continue the fight to keep the planned state park along the 11 Point River.
I was half wrong. DNR didn't appeal, but the Attorney General's office did. So very, very happy to be wrong in this situation. Our Attorney General, Eric Schmidt, he's a great guy. I mean, he was a great senator. I'm thankful. I'm thankful that I was wrong. I stand corrected, and hopefully this will take care of that issue that we've been facing of losing the 11 Point State Park. Also, got to tip our hat to former Governor Jay Nixon and Bill Bryan, former State Parks Director, the two that were really instrumental in acquiring these properties, for an op-ed that they wrote. It was masterful. If you haven't found it in your local newspaper yet, just look it up online.
It was in the Jeff City paper yesterday, I think, if I recall.
Yeah, it's in the Eminence paper. It's made its way around the state. It was written so well. Just real thankful that Governor Nixon and Bill Bryan are still engaging on these issues and standing up for us here in Missouri, because it looks like the fight is far from over, and hopefully we'll have our 11 Point State Park. So thank you, Attorney General Eric Schmidt. Hats off to you.
Now, more city dwellers are embracing camping, the outdoors, with some mixed results. This came from Fox News, and it was such a fun story that as the pandemic presses on, city dwellers are turning to camping as a safe, socially distant alternative to typical travel, and there were a bunch of people in this article that shared their experience to the point that they had never camped, never thought about it before, were on YouTube and online looking at checklists of everything they would need for a camping trip, and then got to their campsite to realize there was no cell service, and they were wondering why their YouTube video wouldn't load on how to pop their tent up. But I think just being avid outdoorsmen and women and campers and just fans of conservation, I think it's a reminder that it's one of those double-edged swords. I find myself sometimes too having lack of patience, which is supposed to be the most relaxing time when you're out in the woods hunting and fishing, but it seems like it's there I'm on edge most sometimes, and with little patience for people that may not know as much as I do. And reading these stories and seeing how excited people are and how much fun it was, even though it could be a cluster at times, it's a reminder not to get so frustrated with the person at the campsite next to you that may be struggling putting up the tent and maybe going over and helping, and it could be a teachable moment.
Camping occurs on so many different levels. We went into Echo Bluff last night for dinner, and there are $50,000 RVs in there that have flat screen TVs and jacuzzi tubs, all the way down to a guy that's backpacking into the wilderness with nothing but a bedroll. So camping is anything and everything between that, and there's opportunities for people to get involved across the board. So hopefully people can find those campsites that do make sense for them. You and I are trying to get away from Wi-Fi signals. We want to disconnect, but there's still families out there that want to have that. So that's just another tip to make sure you research the location you're going to. Jerry, were there any Wi-Fi signals at the campgrounds you grew up going to as a kid?
What's Wi-Fi?
The guy who runs the New York City hiking and backpacking group on Facebook said that these new campers are amazed by the amount of bugs they see and the variety and how big that they can get.
Well, when you served as director, a big role that you had to do was try to get people engaged in the outdoors.
Well, absolutely, and I think that over the history of time here that with the restoration of deer and turkey and those kinds of things, quail, everything, I think that has created an atmosphere that people like and causes them to get outside more because they want to see these things. If you recall, you came down one time and we went down to Big Springs Park, and you were amazed how many deer there with fawns. They had some twins, but a lot of them had triplets. And people still like to go down there and see those. They may not hunt, they may not fish, but they like to do that.
That's such a great point. We're talking about going out into the wild areas of the state and seeing wildlife when you do that. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into it more, but when you were a boy, a lot of those species were still just starting to be brought back. And you lived through an era where we were really devoid of some wildlife species that today we could never imagine not having. And it was interesting for me when I went to Iceland, because Iceland looks like you're in Yellowstone National Park. It's the most beautiful, pristine landscape you could ever imagine, almost completely void of wildlife. You're looking out across these large, valleys and in between mountains and rivers running by, and you just expect there to be a bull elk or a moose or some kind of a stag standing out there, and there's just nothing. And it leaves you kind of with an empty feeling, like this beautiful puzzle's just not complete.
I haven't been there, though, but I'll take your word for it. I don't think you ever told me something wasn't true, and I hope you never do, bro.
You don't know him that well, then.
Honest Abe over here.
I'll take his word for it, though, at the present time. But I am kind of concerned now of what you just said.
Because we brought it up before on this podcast, just about getting new people out camping and in the outdoors and how intimidating it can be. And I think it was during the Sarah Pauly podcast during the mystery bait bucket question, telling the story of my fiance Savannah and the heron that she heard and thought it was an old man screaming for help from the woods, that she was just terrified. She couldn't sleep. And I think we do take it for granted sometimes, that we get so used to it, that the darkness and the sounds are so different if you're not used to being even even in like a Montauk State Park or a campground like that, you can still hear some weird stuff out there once that sun goes down.
You absolutely can, and that's part of the experience, and hopefully, you'll get more comfortable time after time and start to appreciate and enjoy those sounds and those experiences.
Well, I always enjoy it, and I got to where I could, sound a little bit like some of the outdoor things that maybe, like a crow. And I don't use a mouthpiece for calling. And
Steve Jones better watch his belt.
Yeah, we should have a calling contest between Jerry and Steve Jones.
Yeah, we got to have a call-off over here.
Well, it's those things, that I have heard so many times myself that you can learn to do a pretty good job of trying to imitate those sounds.
Now, finally, there is now a salmonella outbreak in the U.S., and it's because of exotic pets. That if you want to have a weird pet, you're going to have to deal with some weird consequences. That there's been 32 people in 17 states with one strain of salmonella, and the overwhelming majority of them had contact with a pet hedgehog or a pet bearded dragon. Apparently, this strain has come from one pet dealer that sent them out across the U.S. So now there's been a warning. They've sent out a warning that you should be very careful if you have a pet hedgehog or pet bearded dragon. Did you ever have a weird pet growing up?
No.
We were very mainstream in our pets.
Yeah, I think pets should stop at dogs. I know you have a cat, but that's why we can't live together.
I think there's some other reasons why we can't live together, too.
Yeah.
But that cat is definitely the spawn of Satan. It is so mean.
Well, when I grew up, every person down in the hills had what they called a squirrel dog. And so they used that, and they were very good, and they made wonderful pets as one. I had one when I grew up as a young boy, and his name was Wiggles, and the reason the guy that gave him me, he had a long tail, and he cut it off for some reason about halfway off. So he would wiggle that little tail, and I named him that. He was a wonderful squirrel dog. I've had other pets, I was a great waterfowl hunter. I hunted waterfowl an awful lot when I was working for the department, and I had my big old yellow lab, wonderful retriever and whatnot. My great uncle Lim, who lived up at our old farm on Low Wassie, he had a cat. And that cat stayed at the crib. There's lots of mice came in for the rats and mice there, and it stayed out there. And so they have their place, but sometimes they have problems as well.
During your time with the department, did you ever remember coming across any exotic species? Did you ever have to deal with anything crazy like a tiger?
No, nothing like that. They just didn't exist, at least in this part of the country at those times.
No alligators swimming in the Lake of the Ozarks?
No, I think during my tenure as a director, they accused us of stalking those.
Well, I'm glad some things haven't changed then. The department's still getting accused of dropping timber rattler snakes out of helicopters and releasing Black Panthers.
That went on all the time when I was the director. Absolutely, yeah.
Because when I was at Jacob's Cave Flea Market, there was a woman there with a pet possum, like literally holding it on her chest, petting this possum.
The mayor's daughter keeps possums inside her shirt. She walks around with baby possums. She's like a mama possum, keeps them tucked in like top of her bra.
Well, because I know some people that keep like raccoons as pets too, and Savannah's always begging to take one of the baby raccoons out of the dumpster, and I'm like, no, you can't have a raccoon.
My mom's father was a conservation agent, and they had raccoons and chipmunks and all kinds of crazy stuff.
I had an ex one time that she would always tell the story of having a pet squirrel growing up as a kid that fell out of a tree or something, and she nursed it back with an eyedropper, and how she loved that little squirrel and domesticated it.
I got a problem with pet snakes.
Yeah, if you have a snake at your house, I'm not staying. Like, even if it's in a different room, I'm so uncomfortable by reptiles.
We're probably just not going to be friends either.
No.
Because there's something wrong with you.
You're weird.
Yeah, if you want to have snakes in your house.
Yeah, if you got snakes and lizards.
Well, I've never been too much enthused about having those kinds of things, but we used to have a lot of people in the Ozark Highlands that they had pet raccoons and pets like that. I don't know of any of them that ever had pet snakes, but I do know a person that was our neighbor one time, and he had a pet squirrel, and he had it inside the house and whatnot, but it was climbing up a side of one of the windows, got a hold of something, and it fell off, and he had a candle there, a candle light, caught the house on fire, and he burned down.
All because of the pet squirrel?
Yeah.
Oh, no. But that was the last pet squirrel he ever had.
I don't know. I know it took him a long time to get a house built back, so he's probably busy doing that rather than fooling around with pet squirrels.
Well, Jerry, we want to talk to you about growing up down here in the Ozarks, and then, of course, your career and now what you're doing kind of to enjoy the golden years. But you're born in Low Wassie?
No, it's kind of strange. I was born in St. Louis, Missouri.
What year was that?
1930, in a Salvation Army hospital. And these were very difficult financial times. It was under the big depression of FDR. There was nothing anywhere, you know. And my grandmother's old bachelor brother was living on our whole home place at Low Wassie. So he told her, said, bring the boy and come down here and we'll get along just fine. So that's what she did. And so I continued to live there. I don't know how much you want to know about all of that. But even though it was a bad time, you know, the hill people that had a little bit of get up and go about them, we always had a wonderful garden. And I started gardening when I was about 5 years old, and she would let me help do that. And I just thought that was wonderful. And but, you know, we thought we were poor, but in reality, we had people living around us. My goodness gracious, they were poor. I don't know whether they didn't have to get up and go to have a garden or what. And my grandmother, we picked wild blackberries and we canned all kinds of stuff. And this one family, if we wasn't giving them stuff all the time, they would starve to death. So it's a kind of a funny thing about what people do.
It was an era where the necessities were really of more value. Today in America, we throw away 40% of our food supply. Can you imagine that in those times?
No, we didn't. So but we had no electricity at that time, and but we had what we called a cellar. And it was keep things cool. We had a cow and milk, and you didn't keep it very long, but long enough, you know, where you can use it. My grandmother used to let me churn butter for her and whatnot. But all of that added up, and we lived quite well compared to other people.
Describe Low Wassie in the 1930s.
Well, the Low Wassie is... It's, according to my grandmother, it is an Indian name, and it's spelled L-O-W, W-A-S-S-I-E, and it means a place of low prominence, because there's a big, huge Pike Creek goes through there. And by the way, there's a High Wassie up in Minnesota, so I guess it means the same thing. But... We lived well, I thought we did. I know probably the best time in our lives was when World War II started, and there was a demand for all kinds of things, and so many of the families left and went up there. But we picked 2 water buckets full of blackberries every morning, and the old San Francisco Railroad come through, and we could go over there and catch it, and we could sell those for 70 cents a gallon. And then, so we had quite a bit of money that way. And then we'd buy a bunch of stuff we needed and catch it back going the other way.
I imagine, too, just growing up that way, that really built a work ethic in you that continued on through your professional career as an adult.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that people need a good work ethic. If they don't have it, I don't think they're ever going to amount to very much. That's just the way I feel about it. And so another thing I like about people that do have, I had the pleasure and the honor, I would call, of working with some very wonderful people when I was a director of the Department of Conservation. And I never considered those people my employee. I considered those people as my co-workers.
So, growing up in Low Wassie, where did you go to school?
Well, we had a Low Wassie school for a long time, and it was the largest and the best rural school up to the 8th grade in the state of Missouri. There was some German people came into the area, and they were mortified at how a little one-room shack with a big pot-belly stove, and they were carpenters, stonemasons, and they said, if you will buy some the material for us, and they actually made bricks, by the way. And it was the most beautiful school. They made everything in it, and they paid for a lot of it, and yet continued to be there, and for a long, long time. During the war, I guess when I was about the 6th grader, me and my grandmother moved into Winona, Missouri, but that school still stayed in place. In fact, while I was in college, I came down, and my grandmother was living on the old place, and they wanted me to come over and be the teacher. And I told them, no, I was in the process of getting education. But they told me they could pay me $250 a month. That's quite a bit of money. But I said, no, I'm going to college, and I don't want to do it. And eventually they had to fold up, and they started running the school bus and taking all those children to Winona.
So were you raised by your grandmother?
Yes, I was.
So were your mother and father in your life?
Well, let me tell you about that. I started to tell you before that my mother went to Poplar Bluff. She had a cousin down there just to get her job. And so she did, and she was very lucky that she did. As far as my father, you have to have one, of course. But in the hills, and they hear him otherwise, I was what you call a bastard. And there was an awful lot of those in the hills. And every time that happened, either the grandmother's parents, and they ended up raising some. So some of my best buddies down here that I went to school, they did not have a legitimate, if that's whatever you want to call it, father.
Who was it that was real instrumental in getting you involved in the outdoors? Where did this early love
Well,
affair
I tell
start?
you when it early started. I was a sophomore in high school, and I had to walk out about 3/4 of a mile through the woods to catch a school bus. And I was walking out there one day, and there was a doe with a fawn in the middle of the road. And I got so excited, I ran all the way back to tell my grandmother. Well, she was a conservationist of the first order. And she said, well, I know you're really excited. You've got all those little friends. But don't tell them because they'll tell their dad. And she said, those son of a bitches will be down here trying to kill it. And then my first wild turkey was when I was a senior. I played basketball and baseball, and I'd have to stay in and to practice. Then I had to walk home about 5 miles. And I was walking, and I saw some birds way down in front of me, and I first thought they were buzzards. And then I thought, no, they're bigger than buzzards. And I got up and close, and it turned out to be wild turkeys, and I was very excited. And then one of them all of a sudden just doubled in size. And it turned out, I learned later, that was a gobbler, and he was strutting and doing his thing for his girlfriends there. And So that's when I got involved some. And earlier in the very early history of the Department of Conservation, they had a program that they called a Nature Night program. And you could earn points by building things. And so we used to plant the Lespedeza seed for the quail, and we built brush piles for other critters and whatnot. And so she was really one that got me started. And I've got my original things that I had in there on the wall. You might want to go take a look at them after a while.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Winona. When we moved to, during the war, we moved up there probably in 1942.
So were you just a little bit too young for World War II?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I enlisted in the Navy in 1950. I was working in West Texas in the oil fields, and I never made so much money in my life. I thought I was rich. I'll tell you a funny part about it, though. When I got my first check, back in those days, the people that wrote it all out by hands, and they had how much I'd earned, and then they had what I received. And I was down there with my mother and my stepfather. And I said, "Mother, these son of a bitches have screwed me out of a bunch of money." She said, "No, son, you're welcome to income tax."
Yeah. I thought they were holding on to some of that your money.
Yeah.
But it really sounds like you telling your stories about conservation that you were a conservationist from birth almost, because of your grandma being out in the green thumb and in the garden and just enjoying nature.
Well, my old great Uncle Lem, he had as I talked about, a squirrel dog and whatnot. And but my grandmother did not like him. She loved him, but when him and one of his old buddies, they would hear about a wild turkey someplace, they would take a team and with some blankets and whatnot and some pots and pans, they would go and camp out and kill the turkey. And she said, "Lemroll," she said, "why in the hell do you feel you have to kill every turkey in the world?" And she said, "Well, if I don't, some other son of a bitch is going to go do it." And he's probably about right. And
do you think that's just because of the culture, or was it because of the time that everyone was hungry and if there was a chance to get a wild bird?
No, it didn't have anything. It was the prestige, I think. If somebody said, "I got this wild turkey," because they wasn't any, and they brag about it. Another story about wild turkey, one of my jobs was to feed the chickens early every morning, and I did that, and I started to have a hen come up and feed with them. And she said, "Well, don't tell anybody." But that I screwed up. I went to the Low Wassie, and all these old boys sat around this big pot-belly stove, chewing tobacco and spitting on it and whatnot. And I was excited. And the next morning up the hollow, I heard ga-bam. And the turkey never did come back. And she said, "You messed up, didn't you?" I said, "Yeah, Granny, I did." So that's kind of the way things were going back in those days.
So after high school, you went into the Navy?
Well, I went down and worked in the oil fields for a while, and we had a guy get killed on the oil rig, and so my mother decided she wasn't going to let me work there, even though I was 18 years old. But so I worked as an apprentice carpenter. But my grandmother called me and told me that her friend, who was on the draft board at Eminence, that's where the county seat is, I would be drafted in 2 weeks. So I went home, and my cousin and a couple of my buddies, we went to Poplar Bluff and enlisted in the Navy. And the reason for that, she had two nephews that was in the Navy during World War II.
And why the Navy instead of the others?
Yeah, because the others were, and one of them told me, he said, "You'll always have 3 warm meals a day and a warm place to sleep at night," and he was absolutely right.
Tell us about your naval career.
Well, I was in the aviation branch of the Navy. I always liked airplanes. I used to build lots of model airplanes and even tried to figure out if I could build one that you could toil with a bicycle and get it airborne. That didn't turn out very good. I like to kill myself.
Well, hold on, tell that story. We can't just pass up. So you were building a plane that someone could
small
sit
enough,
in?
but I figured on real windy days, you head into the wind, and we had a big long field there that we could get airborne, and we would take turns, but it didn't work out very well.
Like take turns, one person manning the craft and the other person on the bike with the rope trying to get you up in the air?
Yeah.
So you were just building a glider then, just trying to get it up there?
That'd be exactly about what it was a glider.
Did you get it off the ground?
Yeah, that's how I got banged up.
How high off the ground did you go?
Well, we got probably 5 or 6 feet, and I thought that was pretty good,
So did you ever fly a plane?
I flew in lots of aircraft. I was had to have a lot of special training. I was what they called a combat air crewman, and I flew on lots of aircraft and whatnot. I went to an awful lot of specialized training to work on aircraft, which I did. I was on the air station at Guam for about, probably at least 2 years. I was supposed to get to come back because I had all this special training. I had to continue to stay there till they found someone to take my place. So then I come back, and I was stationed at Moffett Field, California, and the Bonhomme Richard was the aircraft carrier that provided all the air support for the Korean War. And they would have all these planes that was banged up, and I'd bring them in, and I would help fix those. Also, I was at the Naval Air Station at Corpus Christi, and we had 365 aircraft. They were twin-engine SMBs, and they were training the pilots how to, what they call blind flying, how to fly, and that was before they had all the electronics gear. And we had to keep all those airborne as much as possible. I know one of their big problems was their exhaust stacks would crack, and you had to take that off, and it took about 4 hours. Take it off, weld it, which I did, and put it back. And so my supervisor, I said, why don't we just weld those on the plane? He said, oh my God, aircraft gasoline. And I said, we can take rags and things and put water and put around those. And he said, well, let's go give that a try. So we did it, and it worked fine. It took us about 15 minutes versus 4 hours. So we told the commanding officer, and he said, oh my God, you're going to kill yourself. And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, here's the deal. He said, you guys go ahead and do that. But he said, if you blow yourself and the plane up, I'm going to tell them that you were not authorized to do that.
Well, it seems like with all that training and it being such a niche thing that you could have went and made a really good living just from what you learned in the military.
I absolutely could. When I had to make up my mind whether I was going to go to college, or I had an offer from McDonnell Aircraft in St. Louis, and they offered me a job at more per hour than what my stepfather was making as a union carpenter in St. Louis. And they also told me that they would teach me how to fly airplanes, so then I could do some testing and whatnot.
I bet that must have been a difficult decision, being a young man, of going to school or doing something like that.
Well, it really was, and I was, my stepfather told me, I went over and talked to McDonald, and I come back, and he said, well, you took that offer, didn't you? And I said, no. And he said, well, you're a dumb son of a bitch. And, boy, my mother crawled on his ass big time, and she said, you shut your mouth. If he goes to college, he'll be the first one in our family ever to college, and you're too, you dumb bastard. So I did it.
Where'd you go to school?
University of Missouri, and I majored in forest management.
So that's really where the conservation career began.
Yes, my first job was in Ellington, Missouri, as an assistant state forester.
Now, when you were at University of Missouri, there were some really big names in and around the area at the time. Did you know Rudolph Bennett?
Knew him quite well. He was one of my instructors.
Yeah, I mean, he instructed so many guys that came up.
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, there's some wonderful people up there, and I know one of the gentlemen that was in soil science. He written all kinds of books and all those kinds of things, and I know we was out one day, and he came in. He didn't teach. He quit that, but he would take kids on, young men on field trips. And he always won, and it was so much. I learned more about soil science that day. But I did quite well in that, and I ended up getting an A in that. But there's several things I liked. I liked plant science, physics, and stuff like that. And I had ended up, back in those days, you had EMSI instead of A's, B's, and so forth. That's the way they graded. And so I ended up grade with an S, which is satisfactory, S plus actually.
So your first job out of college is working for the new Department of Conservation?
Yes, and what I did real well. They liked me, and I didn't even work. I worked less than a year at Ellington.
In forestry?
Yes, and they had a job opening at Neosho. So they sent me down there as what they call the district forester, so I was in charge of everything. And I worked there for a while, and then they moved me to Camdenton, Missouri. I worked there a while, and then I worked at Eminence for about 3 years, there for a while, and in 1965, they promoted me into Jefferson City, working in the forestry division. I worked my way up to what they call state forester, and then I worked myself up to an assistant director, and I did all of the lobbying, I guess you would call it, and I did a good job. I knew everyone quite well, and so then when the director decided to retire, I applied for the job. I didn't know it, but he had recommended to the Conservation Commission that they hire me. And
who was he?
Mr. Larry Gale. So then when I got to be the director, I was in 1987. I had to work 6 months as kind of an intern or whatever you want to call it with Mr. Gale. And so then I started working. Since I'd had such success as a lobbyist, as an assistant director, I really did well. Quite well, and I had everyone working for me and helping me do things. And I know that's very important.
So in the 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, when you're working the legislature, what were some of the big issues at that point?
Well, during that time, there was a few times when there was people in the legislature that didn't want to accept the constitutional authority that the Department of Conservation had. And so we had to work on that some. But by the time I got to be the director, I think we pretty well got rid of that. And I had a wonderful time working with the legislators and had no trouble whatsoever. We had also built up an excellent working with the farming community, Farm Bureau, and those people. And you need that. If you think about it, if there's probably, of the 44 million acres we have, 42 million of that are privately owned. If the farmers and other landowners would say tomorrow you can't hunt and fish on my land anymore, they'd put them out of business. They couldn't have any permits. So those are the kinds of things, and I just really enjoyed working with the members of the General Assembly, and they're having some problems now a little bit with that, so I'd be glad to be their ambassador.
No, I couldn't agree with you anymore about the importance of agriculture and conservation working together. You know, we talk a lot about that. The job that I'm in now has a lot to do with that. But no, I've been with you to the Capitol, and there's still reverence for you up there after all these years.
Yeah, I was. They had a bill that I went over to testify for, and I was amazed. There was 2 senators there that remembered me, and one of them said, "Well, Mr. Presley, you've had a long, good career in conservation," and he said, "I think you know what you're talking about."
Yeah, it's good to have sage advice in the background.
Yeah.
What would you say your proudest accomplishment was as a director?
I think my best is getting along with all the other agencies, the governor's office. I had an excellent working relationship over there, and doing those kinds of things to where keeping everything smooth going, and so there wasn't any problems. There wasn't any problems at all. We never had any problems. And but I want to give some of that to the employees. We had a conservation agent in every county at that time, and I always thought they were ambassadors out in the field. And they do an awful lot. They enforce the laws, but they go to all kinds of meetings and they do that. Don't have to do that, by the way.
I think they're nice. Shags is usually running from them or hiding behind a bush or a tree somewhere. If he'd just give them a chance, they're not that bad.
That's not completely true.
Yeah.
I've actually been asked to speak to the new agents because of a run-in I had with an agent when I first moved out here.
Well, one of the things we did, we got training in all the schools. We could go in, and I think that's a wonderful thing to happen. And there's so many things, like education is a huge, big thing, I think, educating people. I spent about $500,000 in research at the University of Missouri, but every one of those projects was a win-win. Win for us and win for the farmers and people like that.
Well, I want you to tell some stories about some of the names that typically float to the top in talks about people coming up in your era. So, and this is purely for selfish reasons, people that I've revered, starting with Bill Crawford.
I thought Bill Crawford was a wonderful person. Gosh, I forgot how old he was when he passed away.
99 and a half.
Yeah.
I was planning his 100th birthday when he passed away.
I thought the world of Bill Crawford, and there's so many people like that. About every division and section had that,
So Bill worked for you at one point, right? At the end of this, all of them worked for you, and you were the director.
Yes.
Bill was still employed at the department when you were there.
Yes.
And
we had a wonderful research center, by the way. But yes, they did.
So he's one of the guys that predates you. Bill was 17 in 1935 at the founding of the Conservation Federation. So he was kind of our link to the past.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
You've kind of taken that mantle on now.
We've had
our elder statesman.
Well, in some ways, I did have a meeting with Sarah, and she was talking about it. The other thing, they've had some problems with the General Assembly. They've not got along very well with them over some things. They've tried to control their pay plan, and they've introduced ridiculous bills. There's a guy down in Texas County that, some reason or another, he's angry.
Oh, he's gone. He's gone. That's our good buddy Robert Ross that you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
So he just lost the Senate race.
I suspect some stuff like that might have caused it.
It did. Conservation played a huge role.
Well, I tell you what, I was going to tell Sarah, if he stayed in office, I would go down there and personally tell the people you need to get rid of this guy. The State Forest nurseries in Texas County.
Yeah.
It employs probably 60 or 70 people during this season.
Well, that's always been one of my arguments is when this guy or people like him, they're running down the department.
Yes.
They're running down their neighbors. They're running down people who are friends of friends. So MDC is not just this, like a guy like him would like to say, castle in Jefferson City. I mean, MDC is 1,500 people all across the state of Missouri, in every rural town, in every rural county, fisheries biologists, seasonal workers, nursery workers. Like you said, these are just, red, white, and blue Missourians that work all over the state, and it hurts them when these legislators are attacking, what they care and work so hard for.
I know one time Mike Leibauer was a senator. He was a Democrat, but he was a wonderful man. Back in those days, too, that politics is kind of, everyone worked together. Like it's different now, and it's unfortunate, I think. But he told me, he said, can you give me some idea of what the payroll is? And I said, well, absolutely. And I fixed that all up. And he said, you're the biggest industry in Texas County. He said, we've got sawmills and stuff like that, but your money's there.
So let me ask you this, because we've had this conversation between us on the podcast and off. We've had it with Hal Herring, with a bunch of different people that I hold in high regard, and conservations across this country. When we're talking about the Missouri model and conservation, how great it is, why do you think people like Robert Ross and these certain legislators and senators at times want to take on the MDC? Why do they want to knock them down? What's your personal opinion, and why?
My personal opinion, people like that, they want to be in control, and they think they can do that, and they don't. Apparently, they know nothing about the Constitution and the rights that the Department of Conservation has to do that. That's, I think, what it is. They want to be controlling things, and they think they can. And of course, they can cause problems, but they still, if the Department of Conservation doesn't spend this money, no one else can spend it. It can't be spent. And it just sits over there in a big pile, and goes and gets moldy.
Well, I've got other reasons, and I'd like Jerry to comment on what I'm going to say. But I think a lot of it down here in the Ozarks, too, because really the only people that come out in the legislature against MDC are from the most rural parts of the state, whether that's rural northern Missouri or rural southern Missouri. And they get hung up on one issue. Right now it's been feral hogs. If you go back to Jerry's era, it was when the Ozark National Scenic Riverways came into play and people were displaced off their land. So now you've got generations like two removed from that experience who, if my grandpa would have told me someone was bad or a situation was bad, I would have believed Grandpa, and I would have wanted to do something to make it better. So now you've got like this generational story of MDC is taking our land, or MDC is wrong on hunting deer with dogs, or MDC is wrong on this. And from one generation to the next, that blood continues to boil up. And he's like, I'm going to fix this thing that couldn't get fixed by anybody else, which comes back to control.
I think you're right on that. They want to be in control of everything, and they do anything they can to figure out how to get that control in business. There is a problem down here on feral hogs. We have some people here that they want to get rid of feral hogs, but they don't like the process. They would rather go out and throw down some corn and then sit there with a high-powered rifle.
Do you think that's it, or do you think it's not really hogs that are the issue? It's really dogs that are the issue, because the people down here that have dogs, they like to chase coyotes, which is legal, but they also like to run dogs for deer, which goes back generations, and they like to run dogs for pigs. I think if we didn't have people with the dogs, and I'm not advocating for that, I'm just saying, like, if it wasn't for the dogs and the sport of chasing the hogs, then you wouldn't have this issue over feral hogs, because nobody's going to go out and sit in a tree stand for hours on end or go still hunting through a giant swath of forest trying to shoot a pig. They just like running their dogs.
Well, there isn't any dogging deer down here and hasn't been here now, Brandon, for years and years. Wait.
Legally.
I'm talking legally. They quit that. They're not doing it.
Oh, not up in my neck of the woods.
Well, they are down here. They're people are violently opposed to it.
Yeah. No, up where we're at.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Last opening day, two different packs came.
But on the hogs, it's a different thing.
Yeah.
And because they have these dogs, and they've introduced some mean hogs in this. But I'll tell you about hogs. I used to go possum hunting at night when I was a little boy, and I saved up enough money to buy me a real fancy flashlight, but I carried a lantern because I wanted it. And but I would come up on these hogs bedded down at night, and I had my little old dog Wiggles with me, and he was scared to death, and they would, and they were just all around you. I never had a hog try to attack me, but I was a little bit scared. And
so you're saying feral hogs were an issue all the way back in the 1940s?
Absolutely. On my first job at Ellington, we would go out to mark timber, and you would come up on places where the feral hogs had rooted maybe a half acre or 2 acres, huge.
I did not know that we had them in the state for that long.
Oh, yes, yeah. Well, here's what happened. In the early days of Missouri, they had what called open range, and you had the right to run hogs, cattle, whatever, on any land, private or public, and the only way that you could keep them off your land, you had to have a fence around it. And so the farmers they made a lot of money. They would have 4 or 5 old sows, and they'd always be a boar out there, and so when they would have pigs, they would go out and make a little pen and put some corn in it and take the pigs away and sell them. And that's been going on, and it probably in the 50s, when the legislators would be driving into, and they'd run a big old cow right in the middle of the road at night, or a hog or something like that. When I bought my first car here, I ran into an old sow with a bunch of pigs and knocked my front end out of the line. So they've been around a long time.
Wow.
All right, I said I wanted to name a few people. We got off with Bill Crawford. Somebody I didn't ever get to meet that I wish I'd have known, Charlie Schwartz.
Yes.
Tell me a little about him.
I would say this about him and all the other people like him. They had good educations, and they were experts at what they were doing, and I think that's what made them special. When they told you something, you better listen to it. On him, I remember, I'm trying to think, I guess maybe when I was the state forester, he was doing some research, and he asked me if I would come down here and show him around, which I did. And so there's all people. Really.
As far as conservation artists go, I mean, he was renowned across the country, and he was right here in Missouri.
But I've got pictures of his, by the way, that he dedicated to me. He told his wife, when I die, I want Jerry to have these. That part of it, he did many things beyond his artwork. He knew a lot about waterfowl, and but to get his ideas for the artwork, he liked to go out if he could to actually see some. That's what he wanted to do.
Another one that I'm interested in, I didn't get to meet either, is Ed Stegner, who was the CFM director for 40 years. Tell me about Ed Stegner and also your relationship working with CFM while you were at MDC.
Well, I had good, I wasn't the director at that time, but I was high enough up that I got to go to all of the meetings. And Ed was he was a big bird dog hunter, you know, he liked to hunt birds, and he had some good, and he also liked to grow roses, and he grew lots of roses, and he'd bring them in and give them to the secretaries. He got pretty popular with them, though. But I think he got a lot of his ideas how to do the artwork from going out and actually visualizing these things, because some of them just looked, you know, great. One other thing we did, for a long time, we would always have a special feed for all the members of the legislators, and it was a very, very popular thing. And so Charlie would always draft make a special little print or whatever piece of artwork, and we would reproduce that. And so when all of these legislators come in, they got that. And he was very, very popular.
What was the relationship like between MDC and CFM during your directorship?
Well, it was pretty good. I thought I was a state forester, but I got to come to the meetings.
But when you were the director?
Oh, when the director?
Yeah. When you were the director, how would you say the relationship was with CFM and
with CFM, it was wonderful.
And how did you guys work together at that time?
Oh, we did great. I never had any problem with CFM. Any of the people that were ever the executive director.
So earlier, I asked you about your best accomplishment, your proudest moment of being the director. Is there anything when you look back that maybe doesn't keep you up at night, but is there anything that you would change now with anything that happened?
No, not really. The part was putting a lot of money into research at the University of Missouri. I didn't realize how important that was till I did it. And my first term, we had about $500,000 into that. If I would have thought, you know, how wonderful that was with working with that and the farmers, I would have done it a lot sooner.
Let me ask you this, because I do. We joke on this podcast a lot about how I have a problem with reading social media comments,
yes,
and how ugly they can get sometimes.
Yes.
Like, what would you say to, let's just say, the average person on Facebook saying MDC should be completely defunded, that they're too big for their britches, down with MDC? What would you say to that person?
Well, I try to explain to him as cordially as I could.
See, you're nicer than I am.
That you're all wrong about this, and then you could talk a half a day about why that's not the right thing to do, you know. Where would our wildlife populations be? It's not a matter about where would people be able to go hunt and fish. Would you have quail? Would you have fish in the river? All those kinds of things.
And I think people forget, too, and we kind of just glassed over this earlier, but you were a sophomore in high school until you saw your first deer, yep, and a senior in high school before you saw your first wild turkey. That even being a non-native Missourian from the Pacific Northwest, like when I first moved out here, I was calling my parents going, there are turkeys on the side of the road. This is insane. And to think that even in your life,
they are. Yeah.
in your lifetime, to go from it being such a big deal to seeing one deer, a doe and its fawn, when you're a sophomore in high school, and have all these yahoos on social media saying that MDC doesn't do anything and they blow through It's like, dude, you guys are out of your minds. Like, you don't understand how good we have it here.
In his window of life,
yeah,
we went from
nothing.
Deer were non-existent to we have over 1.3 million of them in the state now.
I just want to shake people, just try to shake some sense into them.
The resources we have here, one of which is, you mentioned a little bit ago, education.
Yep.
And you now have the honor of having the Jerry Presley Education Center here just outside of Winona. Speak a little bit to that.
Well, I felt very good, and I felt very honored by having that named after me, and I appreciate that. Sarah was down and whatnot, and I asked her one time, how come you did that? And she said, well, your daughter wrote me and told me about all your accomplishments, that other people don't know anything about. You just did it and went on. It was part of your business, everyday business, and like planting trees and doing all kinds of programs and whatnot. And so I told her I really appreciated that.
And for anybody that's not been through that area, it's totally worth a stop.
It's the Twin Pines
Conservation Center.
It's incredible.
Named after Jerry now, the education aspect of it. Yeah, there's all kinds of Ozark history there. Yes. There's so many things that are unique to this area.
It is, yeah. Some of the old equipment that was used, how to saw mills and stuff like that.
The old school, all the sawmill equipment.
All the gigs.
I knew right where that school came from. I knew the school teacher years ago when I was young.
That's wild. Because we just stumbled across it randomly, Savannah and I, when we were down here for her 30th birthday. Brandon was nice enough to let us stay at the cabin, and we just decided to branch out, and we came down, and we're going to come to Van Buren. We're flying down the highway, and both of us were like, "What's that?" And then turned around and went back, and we were just so blown away with how cool that little conservation area really is. What would you say? Because you've seen a lot. You've been around. You we talked about earlier. You went from not having any deer to now there's over a million throughout the state. Like, what are some words of wisdom for young people that might be listening to this that are just getting into conservation or wanting to do something or get involved somehow? What would you say to them?
Well, I think if they're interested in education and conservation, then they need to go and get a good education. They need to decide to be a fisheries biologist or a forester or something like that, and they need to get good training. And if they can afford it, I would advise them to go to college and get a master's degree. That moves you up, and then you generally have to pick something out to work on that master's with. I was trying to get a master's in forestry, but I didn't make it. The reason for that was that when I graduated, it was a Department of Forestry, and the gentleman that was in charge, they had two opportunities for people to work on master's degree, and they would be funded by the college. And one of my instructors, he said, you need to do that, and I was going to work on the eastern red cedar. We have so much of it here in Missouri, and so I put my application in, and I didn't get it, and I said, why? And he said, well, Dr. Westfield says that it's a lot of prestige to pick someone from a foreign country. So both of this was from a foreign country. And that didn't go over very well with me, but and it didn't with the instructor either, by the way. But education I think education is a salvation to everything we have in our world today. And I am so impressed with people that are going to school now, and I realize that sometimes the cost of education is expensive, but we have so many scholarships and things is doing that. My neighbor has got a daughter. She got a scholarship to the school of university, I guess it's called Science and Technology at Rolla, and she's got everything's free, including housing.
Wow.
And so I think those are good things, and I think there's people that when I retired, instead of people buying me some, I said I want to start a scholarship program at the University of Missouri. And I had about $5,000 devoted to that. I put that in the scholarship program, and I have added to that and built it up. And they've done a good job of monitoring, so it's about $37,000 now.
Wow.
And it's not just limited to forestry. It's to the School of Natural Resources, and it's atmospheric sciences, something in fisheries, forestry, and all those.
I don't know if you guys can hear that in the podcast, but there's someone jamming. One of your neighbors, is that a band or is someone just blaring that through their speakers?
We're here in Van Buren, Missouri during the fall festival.
It's for the fall festival.
So there's a singer out there. They're out there singing across the street at the big festival area.
Yeah.
So Jerry's here in Van Buren. He lives in Jeff City, but he has a home here in Van Buren, a beautiful getaway. He's got a trailer full of canoes and a jet boat.
Oh, a jet boat that
89
so
years
bad.
old, a fridge full of beer. He's living his best life, and people are belting out, music from across the street.
Well, they're friendly.
What else you got left to do, Jerry? 89 years old.
I'm on we have a committee appointed. The old courthouse here got flooded during the big flood of 2017. I guess it got up to almost to the third floor, and the whole down there was out. In fact, I was here the night it happened.
I mean, it wiped out the town of Van Buren.
Yes, it did. And I was over to Landing having lunch, or not dinner, I guess it was, or supper, we call it in the hillbillies, and I came down here, and there's a fire truck sitting right up there, and they said, oh, everything's flooded out down there. And I thought, oh, my gosh. So I went back and got a room, and I had to get it on the third floor because all the others were flooded. And I came down here the next morning expecting to see bad stuff. And I thought, well, everything looks great. And the water didn't come out of the river. There's a big hollow up here, and I got an aerial photograph, and there's probably about... this drainage has got probably about 7,000 or 8,000 acres. It all comes right at this one little hollow. It comes off the highway over here and whatnot.
But your house was spared.
Yes.
Well, that's a blessing.
But I'm on a committee now. We're trying to restore the old courthouse.
Which is just a big stone building.
Yes.
Very historic.
It's all fieldstone, they call it. It was picked up out. And... they are still working. It takes the government. FEMA is they're trying to build a new courthouse, and they've got the land purchased. But, the way the government works, I may die before they ever get the new courthouse up.
Are you guys taking donations? Do you have a website set up or anything like that?
Yes, and I don't have it with me, but one of the things we have done, we have worked it out to where anyone that donates a substantial amount of money or just a little bit, they can get a income tax return on that. 5013C, is that what you call those, I think? And but the courthouse, we're making a lot of progress. I have a nephew on it, and he's a builder, and in fact his expertise in restoring buildings, and he has moved back here to live, and he's been one of the most valuable assets we have. He does wonderful things about it, I have a friend of mine that he's almost 100 years old. He's a multimillionaire. He started selling.
Is that Red?
Yep.
You introduced me to Red.
Yeah, Red Hogan.
Yeah.
Yep. And I talked to him the other day, and he said, well, he lost his wife here not too long, bless his heart. But I said, when you come back, tell me, and I'll come down and meet you, and we'll go out for dinner and we'll supper, whatever, and we'll do our thing, And but he told me, he said he wants to make a substantial contribution. Red's got the money. He could pay for all of it probably if he wanted to. He built a big new church here, and it ended up by about $250,000.
Well, he flies in and out on his jet, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So
he flies into Poplar Bluff, and then he's got friends down here that go and pick him up.
Living the life.
Living
that beef jerky money life.
Yeah, not that Cessna 172 life.
No.
His home up here is probably worth, it's on the river, is probably worth $750,000.
Wow.
He built it himself.
Well, Brandon mentioned it. Before we get to the mystery bait bucket, it's just more of a personal question. I'm curious about you having the canoes, the jet boat. You talked about earlier having the duck dog and like the waterfowl. Like if there was one, like in Missouri, of all your adventures, of all your hunts, your fishing, if there was only one thing you were allowed to do in the state, what would you go do?
What's your favorite outdoor experience?
Waterfowl hunting. In the fall, I had a big old yellow lab. He was well trained, And I had a lot of friends that waterfowl hunted. We had a place, sort of a private place that we go by the late Mike Malosky. I don't know if you ever heard that name or not.
Now, where was your club at?
It was right next to the big waterfowl up at right.
Swan Lake?
Yeah, Swan Lake. Yeah.
So up by Sumner.
Yes. Well, he married. Mike was an old poor Polak, as he liked to be called. But he married a lady. Her family was very rich. They had a big steel mill down in the south.
So Mike was a smart guy.
Yeah. Well, he had a master's degree in waterfowl management. Yeah, he knew waterfowl quite well, and he loved to hunt. And but one of the things that we used to hunt a lot, and we used to entertain members of the General Assembly. They loved, some of them just loved to hunt. And so we had another representative had a place up there, so we fixed it up and made it up real good, And he used to come down, and so we would waterfowl hunt. And but Mike was a good caller with his mouth, but I had all kinds of goose calls and whatnot, and I thought, that's not working. So I just started. I would drive down the highway by myself, and I'd start. And I got that and do that, see? And turkey. And all these other things you have. That way hands are free,
I'm going to have to start duck hunting. I talked to all these people, what's the one thing, if you can only do one for it's always duck hunting.
We're going to have to grow corn taller to hide them, aren't we, Jerry?
Yeah. Well, I had one, we had, what's the guy that, Englishman, he was the first guy to climb Mount Everest.
Sir Edmund Hillary.
We took him goose hunting.
Huh.
Wow.
And it's kind of funny. He knocked one down, and he just, it was still crippled. And Mike said, "Get out there." He said, No. And he started flopping, and he ran and got back in the blind. He said, "You climb Mount Everest, and you're afraid of a goddamn goose."
I think that we can't. That's the great way to kind of wrap up that part of our podcast. Now, Jerry, before we get out of here, we have what we call the mystery bait bucket, which is actually an antique bait bucket, and it's full of questions submitted by friends, fans, family, anybody that wants to submit a question can. Sometimes they have to do with the outdoors. Sometimes they're just ridiculous. We don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. So if you'll pop open the lid, reach in there, read the question, and then we'll all go around and answer it.
What do you believe but cannot prove?
I'd say Bigfoot. I want to believe in Bigfoot so badly.
Okay.
So bad. Can't prove it. No pictures yet on trail cam, but I'd certainly want to believe. Have you seen anything weird out in the woods like that before?
No.
He's looking at me just like, oh, I thought you were pretty smart until that moment in this podcast.
Well, I could have said that I can't answer that because that's above my pay grade.
That's classified.
Yeah, classified. That would have made
classified information.
Would have made me feel a lot better about myself. That's for sure.
Yeah. What about you, Jerry?
The creation of the world.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I read. I'm a big reader. I do not read fiction. Everything I read about books about Abraham Lincoln or whoever, and I read all the time. And I watch for the bestsellers. Have you ever heard of Dr. Peter Hawkins?
Yes.
I have 3 of his books. He has many. When he first started talking about the creation of the universe, he did not believe in God. He just said it happened. But then he came back a while later and he said, well, this is so precise, everything, They have found so many things out there. They got the black holes and all of these kinds of things. And he said, well, I can't believe it just happened. And it's constantly expanding. But one of the things that technology, we have some wonderful telescopes now, and they're getting ready to do another one, making a better one now. So I think we'll find out more about it, and I'm interested in that. I was a young guy. I would really like to be one of our astronauts. And by the way, I've got a very dear friend of mine. It is.
Over in Eminence.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that I went first, because I already sounded stupid saying Bigfoot, but I found it even dumber going after him.
Thank you for getting the stupid out of the way.
Yeah, I always volunteer to get the stupid out of the way.
Mine's similar to Jerry's. Well, I want to finish with Jerry, though. So how do you think the universe was created?
Well, I believe that some supreme being had to do it myself. And as I say, Dr. Hawkins had changed his mind to that. And I'm not a fanatic religious person or anything like that. But I agree with him that everything is out there, and we're finding more and more all the time. I went down to the bookstore the other day and asked him about books on Dr. Hawkins wrote, and he said there's 4 or 5 more out. I read one of his books that it's out of my pay grade. I don't understand it. Yes, I get a little bit of it, but he's got all these illustrations in there. But I think that there has to be some explanation. I also think that we will never find an end to it, because I think that on simple things here and we have in our world today, every time they find something, the tiniest particle, if you will, then they think, well, wait a minute, there's something else there, And that just continues. And I think that's what God is challenging the people of our world. And I don't think that'll ever end. I know a lot of people are worried about an asteroid. It could happen. But we have the capability of putting a place out in outer space. And we have all kinds of weapons now they want to kill people with. But missiles and things, and it'd be easy for them to launch that and direct it right to the asteroid.
So mine's very similar. I believe in God, but I struggle with religion. So
I do too.
I believe in God in the sense that there's a grand architect of this universe.
Yes, absolutely.
I don't think anything is an accident. And I experienced my religion this morning when I was sitting in my tree stand and I was watching leaves fall. And I was thinking about how that leaf is going to fall and hit the ground and become soil. And that soil is going to grow a tree. That tree is going to suck carbon out of the atmosphere.
Organic material.
That carbon is going to be turned into oxygen and put back into the atmosphere. I'm going to breathe that oxygen. All the animals are going to breathe that oxygen. And how everything is cyclical and how everything is actually connected in one. And that just can't be an accident. When it comes to trying to understand and fathom the universe and the complexity and the size and the depth and how did it begin? Where did it start? How did all of this come from nothing? I just think it's like an ant living in an ant farm thinks that ant farm is the universe in which it lives, but it doesn't understand everything outside of it. So we're just a grain of sand at the end of the day, and something so much larger, so much more complex. But if God would be described as the architect of this universe, and being a Mason, that's somewhat what I've been studied on. I that's what I believe in. I believe in the grand architect of the universe, and you can't prove it, which also takes me to aliens. I don't believe we're alone.
I agree with you 100%.
So there's got to be other life forms out there, and if anything alive is an alien, then without question there's got to be other life out there.
I've had two. I have.
Please tell me you're gonna say you saw an alien.
I have not seen an alien, but I tell you what, I was. When I was a district forester at Eminence, they invited me to come up and spoke to the forestry club, and I went up there. And so by the time I got to Eminence, it was probably about 2 o'clock. And on the south side of Current River, I was coming up that long hill, and I looked back over there, and I saw some red and blue lights. And the first thing I thought was that, well, it's probably something from Fort Leonard Wood or something. So I said, I'm just going to pull over and watch that. It moved along a ways, and then it moved back, and then all of a sudden it went up, and I thought, well, that can't be a helicopter the way it's working. No sound whatsoever. And I watched that thing for 30 minutes, and all of a sudden it like that, and I swear it went out of sight in 2 seconds.
Shags one time had his brain scanned by an alien next to a creek in Oregon.
You say that like sarcastically.
No, I believe you 100%.
That actually happened. I saw.
Well, let me talk to you about religions. I have never belonged to a church. And the reason there's too damn many of them, they've all got their own way they want to go, you know. My grandmother was a Mormon, but I remember one time as she asked me, she said, do you want to be baptized? And I said, no, Granny. She said, what's your problem? I said, we have too many. They claim they're right. Somebody else claims they're right. I know they do a wonderful job. I have a grandson that's a pastor of a big Christian. I think what they do is great. They do an awful lot of things, and I think it'd be good for a lot of people if they did belong to a church. But when they can't come together on it, so...
I agree wholeheartedly. I think churches do more good than harm, but I also believe that it's arrogant that Methodists think Baptists are wrong and Baptists think Catholics are wrong, and everybody hates Muslims. And, like, everybody's just trying to believe in the same sort of God when you get down to it. You know, we all believe that there's a supreme being that's responsible for this incredible world that we get to live in, and yet the money dictates this direction of arrogance towards one belief and trying to get people on that train so you can build a bigger building. And, you know, if it's Jesus that you follow, Jesus didn't have a building. Jesus had a desert that he walked around in. And,
he was anti-establishment,
how
hardcore.
did church become, driven by money? And that's the big problem for me.
What if Bigfoot was the creator, and he's just coming in to check in on us every once in a while, and that's why we can't get him on camera or anything.
You want to see Bigfoot? When you go down through town.
He bought one today already.
Huh?
He already bought one today.
I bought a Bigfoot sign.
He already bought it.
I already bought a big old one.
I got one for my daughter. She had the smaller ones. The old boy there, he said, boy, those are really popular. He said...
Do you know that? Yeah. Do you know the name of that store?
I don't know the name of it.
Yeah, I can't remember what the name of it is, but we were in that store today, and Shags bought a bunch of stuff for his booth at Midway Antique Mall, which we got to shout that out. So
yes.
Shags is now an antique dealer.
He's got a lot of nice stuff that old boy there has.
That's a cool store. If you're ever in Van Buren, you want to check this place out. Just look for the antique store with all the furs and turkey calls and
giant Bigfoot.
Yeah, and giant Bigfoot.
He's got a giant metal art catfish that just is incredible.
Well, he's a great. He is the guy that owns that. His dad was a conservation agent down in Southwest Missouri, and his name he was small, but they called him Bulldog because he's like a little bulldog.
And he said he was a river ranger.
Yes, he was.
That's what he said.
He did that for here. He was a ranger, and so he stayed around. And we have a group of people here that I'll be going to in the morning, but we meet out here at Smallies and. They all come in, and it's quite a mixture of people. We stay out of politics. And
what are the 3 things you don't talk about?
Politics, sex, and religion.
What else is left?
I don't know. We already hit on religion a little bit.
Squirrel hunting.
Yeah.
Well, we probably should try wrapping this up so we can get out and enjoy the fall festival here in.
Well, the color is magnificent down here.
Van Buren. Yeah, it's beautiful.
So. I'm going to tell my daughter about it. I'm going to say Nancy, he's got a friend or two. Get your butt down here.
Jerry, we appreciate you sitting down with us today. Give us one last closing thought about conservation, whatever it is you want to say. Just take us out of this podcast with a nugget of wisdom.
Well, I think it comes back to education. I think that's what we do, whether it's medicine, astronauts in space, or whatever. I think we have to be educated and informed as well how important these things are. And I think I really think we're headed here in the right direction in Missouri. And you have to have some wonderful people, like we talked about a while ago, that have the expertise, whether you're an artist or whatever, that can make this happen.
Well, Jerry, thank you for your time, my friend.